Okay, I want to welcome everybody over here. I'm so happy that you came to celebrate a book that I've been working on for 22 years. I'll fill you in a little bit on that later. But this book is about a young man and men who went off to war at 19 years old, and it changed them forever. Now, let me introduce to you this tall gentleman. He was tall back then too. That's Jim Hayes. He was drafted the same day as me. Rick Jansen was also drafted on the same day as me. We both were sent into the 3rd Platoon of A Company, 2nd, 12th, and we're sent to Vietnam together. Oh, way to the far right. I got to tell you this. Everybody talks about Band of Brothers, the book, and I checked up on that because that was my guide from the curator of the 4th Infantry Division, who told me, you know something, you've got a story here. She was reading my newsletters and she says, you got a story, you got to get it in book form. And I said, I don't know if I can do that. She says, oh, you can do it. She says, remember, when Steve Ambrose wrote Band of Brothers, he had 13 editors behind him. So I want to recognize all the editors from my book. So will all the editors who worked on my book please stand? Oh, they didn't make it? Oh, there she is. That was my editor. She was also my chief researcher. She was able to get in contact with generals who wouldn't talk to me. I don't know, maybe she was wearing a miniskirt or something, but she was able to contact people that I couldn't get to, and she did it. And we had, when we get to Alpha Association, I'll tell you a little bit more about the association we formed back in 2000. And Chris and I had the opportunity to go to the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, and we did research. Because I said, in the year 2000, what was that all about? I really didn't know. And I suspect it was the same with a lot of you Vietnam veterans. You went there, and if you thought about it much, you said, okay, where were you? Well, I was in the jungle, or I was at a base camp, or I was at a fire support base. But they didn't really tell us much about what we did there. Well, I spent 20 years researching what we did. And I found out we accomplished quite a bit. So that's what this book is about, and it comes back, it begins in New Bedford as young men over here, and how we got kind of surprised by a meeting, well, you'll hear it in a little while, LBJ, who was really caught in a bind over South Vietnam because they didn't want to lose Vietnam like they told everybody we lost China, like we own China, but we didn't. So what I'll do is I'm going to start this, and as I go along, I'll explain. You know, I bet, how many people have gone to a book reading? Anybody? Okay. Yeah, to me, I've been to those, and nothing is more boring than have them say, okay, it was that year and that, and they read this thing, and you're saying, oh boy, when are you going to start selling the books? I said, I'm not going to do that, but I will read one chapter, which is only a page and a half long. And what that's going to be about is that dragon up there, who everybody says, what's the dragon got to do with this? So I'll explain to you once I start this show. So I'm going to move over here. Oh, by the way, my publisher is also the historian for the 4th Infantry Division. And that's how we got to be real good friends. And he was the one that said, Bill, you gotta get that book written. And he wrote me today and said, don't forget to tell everybody about that, what's up on the board. August 25th, 1944, my regiment, the 12th Infantry Regiment, was the first regiment to liberate Paris. I'm very proud of that. Now, when the French found out about it, they got kind of upset because it's their country. So they erased the 2nd Armored Division of the French forces and they got into the city. Unfortunately for these Frenchmen, as soon as they got there, they hit the bars and the brothels. So it was us, we liberated Paris. So you never know. Okay, let me read this first thing, now that that's up there. You'll see Tainan province, which I'm going to talk about. That's mainly where we operated out of. That Daocheng base camp, that was our base camp. And this is a big battle that took place that convinced LBJ that South Vietnamese could not save their own country. And that's why we had that thing, that big buildup in the draft. Okay, so this is at the preface of the book. It's entitled The Year of the Wood Dragon, 1964. That was the year I got out of high school. Anybody over here get out of high school in 1964? Because we did. So we're lined up pretty good in 1965 to serve our country. But the wood dragon characteristics are innovative, enterprising, flexible, self-assured, brave, passionate, conceited, tactless, scrutinizing, unanticipated, and quick-tempered. And that 9th VC Division was our adversary. That's who we fought. And they were born in the year of the wood dragon. So they were called the Dragon Division. So this is what it says. In July of the year 1964, the 1st Viet Cong PLF Division was formed, the notorious 9th Viet Cong Division. It was formed in Tainan province, you can see up there in that corner there, northwest of Saigon. This division was originally organized from the 271st and 272nd Viet Cong regiments and additional supporting units. The 273rd was added soon after. By December, the Viet Cong was strong enough that they seized the Catholic village of Ben Gia, which you can see up there blown up. Right here, it was 45 miles from Saigon, which is a real threat to the capital city. During the battle, the division ambushed and destroyed a South Vietnamese Ranger and South Vietnamese battalion. That's 1,000 men. They destroyed them. And that was their best. These were Rangers. It was the first time the NLF launched a large-scale operation, holding its ground and fighting for 4 days. They held that town for 4 days before the South Vietnamese could take it back. And they held back armor, artillery, helicopters, and U.S. air support. The Viet Cong demonstrated when well supplied with military supplies from North Vietnam, they had the ability to fight and inflict damage even on the best armored units. For the first time in their history, the NFL was able to control a government stronghold for several days and inflict heavy casualties on the regular units of the South Vietnamese military in a large set-piece battle. The Viet Cong suffered light casualties with 32 soldiers confirmed killed, and they did not leave a single casualty on the field, which was something. The Vietnamese and the American allies lost a total of 201 personnel killed in that action, 192 wounded, and 68 missing. Now this happened in December of 1964, and they only got more progressively bold and went after biggest towns and cities. At that time, by July 28th, LBJ realized South Vietnam's going to be lost to the communists unless we send in troops. So what I'm going to do, if I can find, I'm going to play an audio file that I got. That was the speech. The speech that LBJ gave on July 28th. Now, July 28th, it didn't take long before the numbers jumped up because we were drafted in December. But in November, there was the biggest draft call in the history of the Vietnam War. 42,000 men were drafted in November. You'll see pictures of that shortly. So let me get to the next one. Oh, this is Alpha Association. This is the group that we formed in 2000 and said, let's go find out, what that was all about. And Jim was there. He's up in the corner. I was down the bottom. Our wives came. And we formed an association. We got up to 320 members who served with us in Vietnam. It's really unique on the internet. And I published newsletters, and that's how people got to know me. And that small group went to that within 7 years. And it got bigger than that. That's just one to show you how many men. Because we met on annual reunions. That one was taken in Indianapolis. Okay, I want to get to this. This is the one that all those young men sat in front of our TV sets and said, what did he just say?
I have asked the Commanding General, General Westmoreland, what more he needs to meet this mounting aggression. He has told me, and we will meet his needs. I have today ordered to Vietnam the Air Mobile Division and certain other forces which will raise our fighting strength from 75,000 to 125,000 men almost immediately. Additional forces will be needed later, and they will be sent as requested. This will make it necessary to increase our active fighting forces by raising the monthly draft call from 17,000 over a period of time to 35,000 per month, and for us to step up our campaign for voluntary enlistments. I have concluded that it is not essential to order reserve units into service now. If that necessity should later be indicated, I will give the matter most careful consideration, and I will give the country due and adequate notice before taking such a...
Okay, now if you lived in New Bedford at that time, the National Guard over here was called up during the Berlin crisis, and they went down to the south, and they spent a year down there. So when he said that they weren't going to call up the reserves, a lot of people in New Bedford that were in the reserves said, phew, until 2 years later when they were called up also. And the tough part of that is these guys over in the artillery unit here in New Bedford they were separated, and they were sent as replacements. And that's kind of tough going as a replacement all alone. When we were sent to Vietnam, we went by troop ship, and we trained together for 9 months. So everybody knew everybody. Jim and Rick went into Seattle together, and we'd raise heck in there. So everybody knew everybody, which was a lot better, except for one thing. When people started getting hurt, it was kind of tough, because these are personal friends of ours. Okay, so that takes care of the draft. That, by the way, that 42,000 was the highest. It never went up that high again. Most of the time it was around 38,000. By the way, that draft board, well, you'll see it here. Let me get it. This is November 1965. Now you can see all the young men lined up there. That's one day of draft out of New Bedford. And that was an incredible amount of men. And you can see there's 5 busloads, and those buses were full. They were all drafted, and they pretty much all were sent to Vietnam. That was a little different for us. Rick and Jim and I, we were kind of special. Because look how many we were. That's pretty much the whole sum total, which kind of leads me to believe that perhaps they realized maybe I shouldn't send everybody on the same day. And they sent us up individually, much smaller groups. Now in this book, I actually detail what it was like, all of this, and what it was like to end up at Boston Army Base and go to Fort Dix the reception, what it was like there. There's a lot of detail that I'm not going to get into right now. Okay, this is 3 months later. Both Jim and Rick and a fellow named Norm Soares from Scotica Neck all ended up in the 3rd platoon of A Company, 2nd, 12th. And we were train and retain outfit, which means we all trained together, we all went to Vietnam together. That particular platoon, well, I'll get to it. This is our company commander, and he was a farmer from Wisconsin, and he had the opportunity to go to West Point, and he said, hey, it's a free education, I'll go there. Little did he know he was going to command a company in Vietnam. But I tell his whole story from his upbringing to his child. There's a few iconic people in my company, and this is one right here. This is a personal friend of mine, Jim, and Rick. He was in the 3rd platoon with us. He was the medic, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. He was killed in a battle over there, and it was quite incredible. What we walked into, we didn't know we had walked into, but I'll get to that in a minute. His whole story. Here's a guy that had a girlfriend, and before he was drafted, they went to Las Vegas, got married, right? Didn't tell anybody. Came back home. He went to live with his mother. She went to live with her mother and father. They didn't tell anybody for 6 months, and they got married 6 months later, officially. That story's in the book. I didn't know that. His wife, his former wife, Bonnie Evans, is still alive today, and we're friends. We contact each other. We talk all the time. But it's funny you make these relationships. I didn't know her outside of seeing her picture, but we're good friends today. Okay, these are ironic people, leaders in our company, and I have stories on each one dating back to World War II. A lot of these men were inspired by their dads and their uncles who served in World War II. And each one has their own individual story to tell. That lower left corner, Peter Filus, this gentleman over here came from Germany. He could have gone back to Germany when he was drafted, decided to stay here. He was going to become an American. And he did. But when he was in Germany, he saw his father die, and there was a flood, and they both ended up on top of the roof. And his father gave up his life for his son so that he could survive that, and had the only plank left from that roof. And he came to America a couple of years after that. So he was quite traumatized. But he was our treasurer for a long time. And the reason why we chose him as a treasurer, he was the youngest vice president of a bank in Connecticut history. He was 28 years old when that happened. Brilliant guy. Okay, this is September 21st, 1966. We'd been training 9 months. They got us over on the docks in Tacoma, Washington. This is a brigade, 3,000 men. And they were going to send us over to Vietnam. On that, we all got sick. It's funny, you go on a troop trip, and you're packed in like sardines, and you're hungry, and you stand in line, and the line moves real slow, and then it goes real fast, because people are leaving the line to get overboard, to get, relieve themselves. It was a tough ship. It was 21 days out at sea. But that was us. You can see the ladies' wives and girlfriends shipping us off, and that corner right there, that's the First Army Band that played music for us. Nice of them. Okay, we arrived in Vietnam October 21st, and then 2 weeks later we learned my company was chosen to march in a National Day parade in Saigon. And the guy said, we didn't come in and march and parade. Guys out in the jungle, crazy kids. But in fact, what happened in that parade, we didn't realize the danger And that was the day that they reopened the palace, because 2 rebels had bombed it 2 years before. They had to rebuild it. So the Viet Cong were waiting for us, and they shot rockets over our heads. And we were in that thing and didn't realize. Now, they were 10 deep. What would it take? Take a pin out of a grenade and toss it in the middle of us. We never thought of it. We were really in danger there. But we survived it. And that's us coming back from that parade. Okay, in November, the day after Thanksgiving, we were sent up, right up here, to Camp Rainier. That's just south of War Zone C. And it's in the Michelin rubber plantation. And that was the biggest money exchange producer for the South Vietnamese government. That's a 6 by 9 mile rubber plantation. And what's unique, the year we were there was the year that Sears and Michelin got together, and what they did was they made the first radial tires, and the rubber they got out of that plantation. So we struggled to hold that plantation, but they pretty much did what they wanted to over there. But down in that lower corner is where we built our camp, Camp Rainier, which was named after Mount Rainier in Washington State, where we trained. Okay, 1967, we got there in November at Camp Rainier, built it, did a little securing in the base camp, and 1967 was called the year of the offense, because remember that 9th PC division that was causing havoc? We finally had enough men in company to go after them. There were 420,000 men by then. And we had 85,000 when LBJ was sending troops. Now guess where most of those guys that were going out in the jungle? They were draftees. And I can tell you that for certain, because out of my company of 180 men, 178 were draftees. So unless you're real smart, and I guess we weren't, huh? Yeah, so we were put in the infantry and sent out there. But those are 2 major operations. One was in the Iron Triangle, Cedar Falls. That happened before we went up to War Zone C. And if you remember a guy named Alexander Haig, he was Secretary of State under Reagan, and he was also Chief of Staff for Nixon. I met him at the heliport, because he was a battalion commander in Vietnam of a 1st Division unit. And when they went into that Iron Triangle, if you look at this place right here, Ben Suk, his battalion, Alexander Haig's lieutenant colonel, he had to take that town. And what they did to secure it, you can see us over here at Dao Tiang. They didn't fly right to it. They flew down, and then they hung a right. So the enemy wouldn't know where they were coming. They got in that village, and they were really caught off guard. The VC had fled. But that was they cleared out the Iron Triangle for about 3 days, and the Viet Cong just came right back in, which was typical for the Vietnam War. They'd get out of your way and then go back in after you leave. But that happened in January, the beginning of January. While that was going on, we were securing our base camp right around Dao Tiang, and we had our first killed in action in my company. It's a young man named Joe Noel. He was from Hope, Rhode Island. In the book, I talk about going to his 50th anniversary of his death, and it was like I had a flashback. The priest asked me to bring the wine up and the water. And I said, I can do that. And I went to the back of the church. And as I'm standing in the back of the church, I'm realizing Joe was killed in a rubber plantation. And when I looked at the pillars of that church, they were lined up perfectly like they were at the rubber trees. So I had a flashback. And that's where he was killed. Ironically, our first man was killed in action from friendly fire. An artillery round killed him for the artillery round. What happened was they didn't dig in deep enough with the artillery piece, and it kept climbing up. And finally they just lobbed him into us, and he was killed. There's a square named after him in Hope. Okay, the bomb factory battle is important because that's where the Medal of Honor was earned. Donald Evans was a medic, and when this battle took place, 2 months before, that bomb factory was found, but they didn't tell us. And we're going through elephant grass, which is about that high, you can't see through. Overhead was a brigade commander, and he stopped us right here and said, okay, take a left and go into the jungle. And right then, one of our platoon, Lieutenant Gonzalez, who was a mercenary, he's a Cuban mercenary, he was in the Bay of Pigs, he said, we're gonna get hit. And he was right. They didn't get very far into that thing, and all hell broke loose. And second platoon was sent in first. And finally, they couldn't do anything with that. They pulled them out of there. And then they gave them about 15 minutes to get ready for a second assault. So now the third platoon, our platoon, was sent in, and it really got hit bad. This is where Evans won his Medal of Honor. He went back 4 times to save men up in the front. He'd get to the front, he'd patch them up, and he'd drag them back to the rear. He took one too many chances, and the last time he went in there, he was killed with a grenade. Originally, they put him in for a Silver Star, and our brigade commander said, nah, he doesn't deserve a Silver Star. We'll give him a Bronze Star. And that Lieutenant Olson, who was at that time in charge of the company, says, oh yeah? He went back and talked to the guys from 3rd Platoon and got what really happened, and they told him exactly what happened. And eventually, he said, I'm gonna put him in for a Medal of Honor. And he did. And he never heard anything about it for a year. A year later, I opened up the Boston, remember the Boston Record-American? On the back page, I see Bonnie Evans. And I knew her from the pictures that he had sent me. And I said, oh, what's going on? He was getting his Medal of Honor. His wife was receiving it with his mother and father. And I said, he did get the Medal of Honor. Now, the guy that put him in for that wasn't told by the Record-American. He read about it in the Army Times. They didn't even have the courtesy to tell him that Medal of Honor you put in, it was accepted. Today, the community, the hospital at Fort Carson is named after Donald Evans. Every medic that receives his medic graduation at Fort Bliss, Texas, Fort Sam Houston, Texas, everyone walks on a stage that's named after him. So he's a real hero. He was the first medic, he was the first 4th Infantry Division man to receive the Medal of Honor in Vietnam. And I was lucky enough a few years ago to go visit his grave. His brother showed it to me, and it was all flat stones. Nobody could have raised stones, and you had to get real close to realize on his tombstone was Medal of Honor. And that's how Donald would have liked it. That's how Donald would have liked it. Okay, now that was on January 27th, and then Operation Junction City. This was the biggest operation of the war. 40,000 men were involved, 3 divisions, 2 brigades, and we were gonna go up there and we're gonna kick their butt. And we did. And what they did up here, up in this corner, see those parachutes? The 173rd dropped down on parachutes, and that was unnecessary, because we were using helicopters in those days. But General Westmoreland was the division commander of the 173rd, so he let him do it. And it's the first time ever that they were able to get heavy equipment down on the ground from a plane using a parachute. Never been done before. I'm sure it's been done many times since. So where we were, my battalion was set up here, and what happened was we circled them, because this is Cambodia. This is where you would expect them to try and escape to. I don't even think they escaped. I think they just snuck in between us. And they weren't willing to fight. They will shortly. But they weren't willing to fight. We spent 2 weeks over there waiting for something to come by, and it was real easy. That was good duty there, just sitting and waiting and building bunkers. So anyhow, this is the first phase of Operation Junction City. This went on until May, this operation. But the Viet Cong really weren't willing to fight at that time. Then they got fed up with it, stealing all their supplies and destroying the base camp. So, on March 19th, Junction City 2, second phase starts up. And we are in this airstrip right here, near the Black Virgin Mountain. You can see the mountain here. And there were 20 helicopters there that were taking us in, and on that morning. And we were supposed to be the first ones in. And for some reason or other, we didn't know for 40 years, we were taken off the helicopters and they put a companion battalion on board. We were fortunate, because this is what happened when that first one on. By the way, this is me. This is my company commander. I was his radio man. And this is, this right here was, we were at Fire Sport Base Gold. And these are 3 divisions that are set up here, and we're gonna surround and we're gonna go kick butt. This is what happened when the second flight came in. 20 helicopters came in, 20 were completely destroyed. They had mines, 155 millimeter artillery shells, and when they started to land, they blew them up. And the 3rd and 22nd really lost a lot of men. And that would have been us. And on that second trip in, I would have been on that, because generally, as the company commander's RTO, he would go in on the second flight in. So I wouldn't be here tonight had not my battalion commander gone in and talked to the higher up and said, you know something, I think this is very dangerous. I don't think we should do this. We should prep that a little better. Now, you have to understand, my battalion commander was on the staff with General Westmoreland, and he knew him well. He was a friend. And when they found out that Joe said, if we're gonna go in, I wanna be on the first flight in there. And when they found out that, they said, take the 2nd, 12th out of there, put the 3rd to 22nd in their place. So he really saved the lives of a lot of 2nd, 12th men. More so after what happens next. So it was all politics. They didn't want to have to tell General Westmoreland, hey, by the way, we got your guy killed, because they sent us into an unsecured base. There was supposed to be people that had secured it. They hadn't. We were wide open. Of course they were waiting for us. Okay, that was on the 19th. On the 20th, and this is where a lot of people that were there was an artillery battalion over there, 2nd 77th, and 2 companies from the 3rd to 22nd. And that's all they could muster, and they were the support. 450 men. And to this day, they'll say, we were used as bait. And they were right. Because when the 2nd 12th was sent up here for the night, this is the 2nd 22nd. They were also trying to reach Fire Sport Base Gold, and they had this river right here, the Sui Samat River, and the Viet Cong knew they couldn't get across that easily. So we're out of the way. We're over here. This over here is mostly all bamboo, very tough to traverse. See this? Oh, wait a minute. See this? This is a trail right here. And this is what the enemy thought we were going to go when the battle started. And they set up a platoon there to ambush us. Luckily, we went through the jungle. And And then they sent out gunships to take out the platoon. Okay, this is the battle. It began at 6:30 in the morning. Actually, we had an inkling of it because Viet Cong were passing our unit in the middle of the night with flashlights, and they don't usually do that. But they did that night because they were in a hurry to get down there, which was about 2 kilometers away, about a mile away. So everybody, all the Viet Cong were in a rush to get into position for the attack in the morning. Right here, you'll see they were completely surrounded. The attack came from everywhere, but the main drive was right here in that southeast corner. And when we got there to relieve them, 3 hours later, we came in right through here, and we drove them back and out of there. Right after we did that, the mechanized unit found a crossing in that Suisamart River, and then they just pushed the VC right out of there. Okay, this is the aftermath. The defenders of the base camp, well, you can see in the lower right corner, they were having religious services, and General Westmoreland went to talk to them to congratulate them. As relievers were sent out in the field to collect the bodies. And there were 637. That was a record for Vietnam. No, that was the highest enemy loss of the war. And you can see in this corner right here, they came in with a bulldozer, and we collected the bodies, and it was tossed in there, and it was covered up. That's still there today, and the Vietnamese have a shrine over there to offer some incense for the loved ones that was lost in that battle. Okay, this is the day report that was done at 9:43 that evening, and it shows you how many people. There were 3,900 artillery fire. That's a lot of artillery shells to fire at an enemy. And there was also some beehive rounds. And what they did, they had to do, they were so close, they lowered their guns, and they fired point blank. They would go out 50 yards and blow up. And they would take down waves of them, because that's what they were coming in waves. There was something like 5 or 6 human wave attacks. And they kept saying, one more push and we got him, one more push and we got him. No. The Air Force was also there, and in the book, I detailed the Air Force participation. One thing I found, the forward air controller who was guiding the jets and the bombers, and he says, what you guys don't know, it was a partly cloudy day. There were breaks in the clouds, but they were at 2,000 feet, the ceiling. And these bombers and jet fighters had to go below 2,000, find their target, drop their ordnance, and then climb out. He says, the G's they must have felt was incredible, because usually they get out of there at 2,000 feet. They had to go below that. But they did a lot of damage and saved a lot of lives. So we were successful with that. At the end of the day, we were given all units that participated were given the Presidential Unit Citation. That's this little blue ribbon I got over here. And the only other time up until then that my unit had gotten that was at the Battle of the Bulge. So I go out to Fort Carson and I see these units that are in my outfit today, and they're wearing this thing, and I'm saying, you're honoring me. That's what they wear it for. And as long as they're in the unit, they can wear it. I was in the battle, I could wear this for the rest of my life. And that is equal to every man in the unit getting the Distinguished Service Cross. That's right under the Medal of Honor. So it's a pretty high honor for us. Okay, I'm gonna play one more thing. Do you remember a guy named Walter Cronkite? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to tell you what he said on the day after that battle.
Fighting in South Vietnam's war zone seas are composed primarily of draftees fresh from the States. Today, General William Westmoreland, U.S. Commander in Vietnam, flew to the zone and congratulated the young GIs for one of the greatest victories of the war, as he put it. He was referring to yesterday's bloody battle in which 2,500 Viet Cong tried to overrun 450 Fort Unionists were counted, and it is estimated as many as 300 more Viet Cong were killed. American losses, 31 dead, 109 wounded. During the heat of the battle, with individual units, it was impossible to determine how overwhelming the victory would be, as we learn in this report from CBS Newsman John Flynn. A short time ago, this was a U.S. Army helicopter. And then Operation Junction City, a disappointment in its first few weeks, broke wide open. Within 2 days, the Viet Cong massed 2 regiments against 2 different American units. And despite successes like this, the Viet Cong took heavier losses. The first inkling of trouble here came on a helicopter assault into this landing zone. The Viet Cong had planted mines in it. Nobody survived this one. A day later, the Americans found out why the Viet Cong had contested the landing zone. The GIs had put 2 battalions right in the lap of the enemy. The 272nd Regiment, an elite unit, heavily armed and made up of both hardcore Viet Cong and North Vietnamese replacements. The 272nd lived up to its unique reputation of attacking in daylight hours, something infrequently done by the Viet Cong. They hit just at sunrise, first a mortar attack, and then the charge.
Okay, now I told you, I'll move back here. I told you about this battle that nobody knows about. The commander of that fire base was Lieutenant Colonel Vesey. Lieutenant Colonel Vesey would move on. He would become the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff under President Reagan. He served in every rank in the Army except one. So he ended up being a 4-star general. And what he did we had a meeting in Fort Carson of the veterans at that battle. And he got up and he said, I went to Vietnam and my job was to find missing in action American men. And he said, I would give speeches occasionally, and on one such occasion, an elderly gentleman came up to me and he said, I know you. And Colonel Vesey said, General Vesey then, well, I figured he read about me in the newspapers or something. He said, no, I know you. And he said, oh yeah, how do you know me? He says, you destroyed my unit in Vietnam. He was the commander of the 9th VC Division, the Dragon Division. And this was 30 years after the war. So you never know how life turns out. The division commander says, you killed a lot of my men. And John says, well, you killed a lot of my men. But not as many as they lost. But for the longest time, once I learned the history of our unit, nobody knew about that battle. And it's an ironic battle that people in the military know it, but most other people don't know. And my publisher says, you've got to tell the story. You're the only one that has all the information on it. And that's why I put this book together. And now I can rest easy. I did well by my guys. Any questions? Okay, now tell all your friends too, okay? So a lot of people will know about it. I want to thank you all for coming. Jim, thank you for coming. Rick, thank you for coming. 57 years ago, we got drafted a block away from this place. It's amazing how life turns out. I know you people are busy, and for you to show up, it's quite an honor for us. Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, well, read the book.
Maybe I offer that we may all stand and offer a minute of silence for those who had served and those who we lost.
Oh, we can do that. You want to do a minute of silence? Okay, we can do that. Okay, this man suggested we do a moment of silence for the 35 men who were killed at that battle. God knows they never got the recognition before. So if you just bow your heads for a moment. Thank you very much. Okay, we got a question. Go ahead.
Yes, what is your opinion about Westmoreland as of today? At that time, they made him such a hero, and today they said he was a big mistake. What do you feel about Westmoreland?
Westmoreland, you have to know Westmoreland's background to realize that he really felt like we're feeling our oats. Let's face it, gang. After World War II, we were ruling the world. And he felt our power was such that sooner or later the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong would surrender. They couldn't take those losses. I mean, there's estimates that we killed 2 million Vietnamese in that war. Americans would never put up with that. We lost 69,000 in the war, and we were enough, we got to get out of there. So his feeling was if he killed enough Viet Cong, they would give up. And it was a failed policy. It didn't work. They just kept sending new recruits down from the north. So that's my feeling is, I guess he did the best of what he thought was going to be. But, you know, MacArthur warned everyone, don't get involved in a land battle in Asia. They're different people. They look at life much differently. All those people all those Vietnamese, Viet Cong that were killed in that battle, the ones who did get brought back, they were put into a cemetery and they were called martyrs. Everybody that gets lost in the war is a martyr. So it's a different framework for us guys who go there, you know, and we come in from I'll tell you, America's a wonderful place after you visited that place. And we all pretty much kissed the ground when we came back to America. It was a long year. It was a scary year. It was a year that I can't remember too many days, outside of when I went on R&R, where I didn't have a feeling in the pit of my stomach of anxiety, wondering what's going to happen next. And yeah, we didn't have battles every day. But when it happened, it was quick, it was decisive, and they were on top of you. Because they knew you were going to call in artillery, so get in tight. And they learned that from the Japanese from World War II. We have very powerful artillery, and it's very precise most of the time. So that's my feeling. Any other questions?
I just wanted to say something that I meant to say before I didn't. I just want to congratulate and I take my hat off your sacrifice, also all the soldiers that fought in Vietnam. But I still feel today that you obey your orders as a good American and as a good citizen. But today I feel that because at the time the Pentagon and the people that were making decisions, I still think it was a big mistake. And I hope it doesn't happen again. It seems like it's happening constantly. And I think we should be aware that these things don't happen. You know, I congratulate in the lives that you saw die on both sides. And today, I'm wondering if that was worth it or not. I question that.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And your realization, war is never good. Only good for the undertakers, as the old song goes. But you have to remember us, there was a major patriotic feeling in the country after World War II. We thought we could lick anybody. And we had relatives and served in World War II, some in the Korean War. And we felt as young men, it was a rite of passage. Okay, it was our time to defend the country. But remember, this was early in the war. I mean, that 1960s, that was the first major operation of that war. And then when Tet came along, then it all came apart because they said, we can't keep taking these body counts. But we never felt, I know I didn't, I never felt like they were dragging me out of their home and sending me somewhere that I shouldn't have gone. I did, be honest with you, I had to look on a map where Vietnam was. What did we know? We were young 19-year-old men, we didn't know. The politics, we didn't understand anything of it. And to be honest with you, to this day, I don't care about the politics. I care about the men that I went to war with. I care about the men that never made it home. I care about the men who became crippled from their service there, and not just physically, but mentally. That's what I care about. And that's the reason I wrote the book. Yes.
Now, Vietnam was a French-speaking country besides Vietnamese. French were there first. You're Franco-American, many others were. Did any of you use the French language while you were there to speak with the Vietnamese?
Okay, I hope I do this right. I went to a French school, St. Anthony's School, and I spoke French for 9 years. But by the time I hit high school, you start to lose it if you don't use it. And I was outside of my barracks one day, and a Vietnamese man comes by in a truck. And he comes into my barracks and he starts speaking in French. I says, oh, good. I'll talk to him in French. And I asked him a question. I said, est-ce que ton machine est cassée? And he panicked. My machine est cassée? I asked him if his truck was broken down. And he went running out, and I said, maybe I shouldn't speak French over here. That's the only time I spoke French there. True story.
I want to bring up a little bit about whether it was a dumb move to go over there. Yeah, well, we all know that. But when you're 19 years old, 20 years old, you know, I'm 76 now, so back then, guys like Dan, we all went to high school together. You know, you do. It's what it was. You know, there was a hell of a lot of us that could have went on that bus to Canada. And you know, I never really knocked anybody for doing it. They had to live with that, you know, as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, some of the things he's bringing up tonight, it's tough. I got drafted. I was working at Firestone Defense Products. Anybody here know what they did over there? They made shells. I was an inspector for 105s and 155s. Are you kidding me? So, it's crazy, you know. He mentioned this Lieutenant Gonzalez. How many here know of the phrase, a soldier of fortune? That's what he was. The guy was whacked. But he fought in the Bay of Pigs. He was crazy. He was a mercenary. You know?
And he hated communists.
Big time. Another thing I want to bring up. My parents had me a little later in life. Vietnam was the first war where people could sit home in their living rooms and watch it on the news every night. I think of my mom and dad sitting there watching it, you know? Not know if that was me, or where I was, or what the hell was going on, you know? 'Cause they were first notified when I got wounded the second time. They were notified by the Blue Cross. I can imagine what my mother, you know? I said, come home, I was 21 years old. I was 25 when my father died. You know? So there's a lot to think about. You know, now they tell me they don't even teach history in school. How many kids under 15 years old even know what the hell Vietnam is? That's pretty sad. You know, I mean, I guess everybody's got their own idea on that. But I don't know what the reason for that is. But I could go on forever, but I just want to get a few.
Thank you. But, good job. Nice work. By the way, Jim was my best friend during training, and we're like Mutt and Jeff, as you could tell. He was at the top bunk, and I was on the bottom bunk in the barracks. And had Jim been 1 inch taller, they wouldn't have been able to draft him. He was 6'4", and you couldn't get him. If you were 6'5", they wouldn't draft you. I would have stretched you out, buddy, I would have. Before I finish, I want to recognize a few people there. You may have seen that picture. Well, first of all, my son, Michael, stand up. He puts up with all my nonsense when I start going back to Vietnam. On the side is my granddaughter, Keely, stand up. She's going to college to be a nurse. It's good time, and I'm getting older. I'm going to need one. And then I want my sister to stand up. Hello? Get up, stand up. In that picture that I showed you outside of the draft board, she was the one in the rear who was crying. My mother was crying. My girlfriend was kissing me on one side. And by the way, she got married while I was in Vietnam. Another story for another day. But anyhow, I got the impression, if you look at my face, and you'll see it in the book, it's like I'm going off, you know, to camp for the summer. I had no sense of where I was being sent. Did you guys realize how, whoa, what are we getting into here? As long as we had rock and roll music, what did we care? But my sister lit a candle every day I was in Vietnam at St. Anthony's Church. And I always said, you know, if you're going to be religious, it worked for me. I never got a scratch. And I always say God kept me alive for this, to tell our story. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Did you know that you can watch any of New Bedford Cable Network shows anytime, anywhere on all of your mobile devices? How, you may ask? Just log on to nbcablenetwork.com and bam! You have all 3 channels at your fingertips: public, educational, and government access. Here, you can view our program schedules, watch our channel's live broadcasts, or search for a particular program in our vast library of shows. Last year alone, New Bedford Cable Network produced over 500 shows, and nearly all of them are available online at nbcablenetwork.com. Not only can you stay up to date with what's happening in your local government and schools, but also dive into some of New Bedford Cable Network's original award-winning programs. So check us out at nbcablenetwork.com.